wish multiverse correction got represented here. If you followed the series from square one, the resolution of that plot hole, you know the one, hits like a truck. The other endings felt like another ending in another Henry Stickmin game. Multiverse correction felt like goodbye, and to me that makes all the difference.
F it.
Okay, I guess it's time to clear this up. Roll the intro! When I made my original 2 Henry Stickmin videos, I left this one out as one of the sortable options. For those who aren't aware of multiverse correction, I'll quickly catch you up to speed. Once you have every ending in the game, you can go back and replay parts of the game as many times as you want. If you've gotten every failure in the game and go back to this screen in the Top Hat for Life route, look under all of the sticky notes on the panel, and then push this button once it appears. A sequence will play that clears up the most long-standing plot hole of the series: who delivered the package in escaping the prison. Well, nobody did. It was all just an effort from the CCC, or the Center for Chaos Containment, to prevent a timeline collapse. I knew I'd get plenty of comments from people asking about the multiverse correction quote-unquote secret ending, but the reason I never included it was because it's not an ending. It's the beginning more than anything, really. It's a send-off, a proper goodbye, just like this comment said. And while I still hold that it's not an ending, I do regret not at least giving it a passing mention. This comment made me realize that I missed out on important lore that even Henry himself likely has no idea about, and it brings up a lot of questions I've had about the series almost since day one. And hey, I'm still not over Henry Stickmin, so let's address these questions now, shall we?
Sir? You might want to come look at this. I'm getting chaos readings at 10.6. It's coming from the museum.
My first question is, how does Henry know which option to pick? This may seem obvious at first, but part of the charm in this whole series is that the correct option is often the least intuitive one, but it also subverts your expectations by making the most intuitive answer the correct one, and also by doing everything in between. Sometimes an option does fail, but in a way you weren't expecting it to, and sometimes even when something works, it's not clear how or why or what the thought process behind it was. Therefore, there must be something Henry is doing to know which option to pick. Unless you want to claim that every timeline is Henry picking randomly, and the true timeline Henry is just the luckiest of them all. Remember that fails don't count as timelines, judging by the text in the multiverse correction ending, and by the fact that you can't fix the overabundance of timelines until you see every failure in the game, which implies that it's pruning unnecessary paths. So, assuming that Henry is just a stand-in for the player, along with any allies he happens to pick up in certain paths, I ask again, what's Henry's reasoning for choosing the options he does? What's his thought process? Does he know which options succeed simply because he's lucky, or is it another reason? This is dipping slightly into speculative territory, but let's explore what might be going on if it's not blind luck. My first idea is that Henry actually has timeline powers. It's not like he ever says otherwise, and there's no evidence that every Henry is a distinct separate Henry from every other Henry. This idea plays into how timelines work in Undertale, where Flowey and later Frisk can choose to go back to a previous save state if they want to try for a different ending. If Henry tries an option and it ends up failing, he can just go back and try again. There's just one thing that puts a wrench into that idea, and that's the CCC themselves. In stealing the diamond, infiltrating the airship, and completing the mission, there's a sequence where a member of the CCC has to pick an option. Henry has no control over these events, but they still function as viable options, and the only way to get an ending and not a fail is to make it so that Henry wins. So it's probably more accurate that the player has the timeline powers and Henry is just the foil that the player acts through as the main character. This is even true of Undertale as well, where control of the protagonist switches between Frisk and Kara depending on how merciful the player is. But this still seems like an incomplete answer. After all, how much exactly does Henry know? Does he just have timeline powers, or does he even have some awareness that he exists within a video game? This brings me to my second idea, that Henry knows which options to pick because he has a feeling about what each one will do. The player has seen everything, so they can act passively through Henry, which translates in-universe as each Henry having a keen sense of foresight. This is probably pretty helpful, considering that Henry has an acute case of dumbass. I don't think he can see everything in detail though, nor can he see too far ahead, or he never would have let Top Hat Civil Warfare or Valiant Hero happen. But anyway, this idea also implies that multiple Henrys exist for each timeline, as different versions of Henry would have different goals. For example, a Henry who cared about Charles would never choose to take over the Top Hats. A Henry who's a heartless kleptomaniac wouldn't even think of other options besides stealing the ruby. A Henry who doesn't trust big organizations but believes in camaraderie would steal the ruby as well as help Ellie, and so on. This is a more nuanced take on the subject, as Henry's character is a bit more fluid than other characters, and it gives more depth to someone who was originally just intended to be the stand-in. This is the idea I find the most intriguing personally, because of how different the different Henrys tend to be. For example, Special Brovert Ops Henry would be absolutely disgusted by Jewel Baron Henry, and Top-At King Henry would be appalled at the mere idea of Top-At Civil Warfare Henry. The first idea is more along the lines of Henry not fully acting like himself in some pathways just out of sheer curiosity, which defeats the purpose of the series itself, where every ending is just as canonical as any other. Okay, so now I've talked about the multiverse correction itself and the nature of Henry's involvement in the universe, but this all raises another question. Does Henry know it was the universe that sent him the package in order to correct the timelines? Henry's backstory is not elaborated upon. We don't know why he decided to rob that bank beyond falling on hard times, nor do we know why he so easily assimilated into different roles. It's like he was simply dropped into existence with no worldly ties until they were created. Of course, vague backstories are magnets for fic writers like myself, but it's weird to not be curious about what he could have been through before this, if it were to ever come up in the series itself. However, for all intents and purposes, I have now addressed the multiverse correction ending. It brings to mind a lot of questions, not a lot of answers, but one hell of an awesome goodbye. I remember watching my brother play Escaping the Prison on Newgrounds on his massive dinosaur laptop when I was in middle school in like 2012, back when Newgrounds was at its prime, especially for stick figure games. So not only has the series become a major special interest for me, both for the gamer and the artist in me, it also carries a profound sense of nostalgia for me as well. I won't lie, this send-off was actually kind of emotional because I've been following the series since the beginning. I remember infiltrating the airship from the earliest branches of my memory, and fleeing the complex was a huge comfort during some of the darkest months of my life. So seeing this goodbye is cathartic and bittersweet, to say the least. That is ultimately why I decided to make these videos. It was all out of my genuine love for the series, and I honestly can't thank Puffballs United and the rest of Inner Sloth enough for bringing us this complete collection. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I look forward to your guys' feedback in the comments. As always, it got pretty sentimental at the end, but you guys get it, I'm sure. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!